From sleeper hits like It Comes at Night to box office record breakers like It and Get Out, 2017 has been a great year for horror. But for every high-profile killer clown, there are a dozen low-key horror movies that slip straight onto DVD, or more frequently these days, video on demand. Here are the underappreciated horror movies that you may have missed in 2017. The Devil's Candy. Mixing heavy metal and horror, The Devil's Candy follows a struggling artist, played with an unsettling creepiness by Ethan Embry, who moves his family out to rural Texas. When the previous owner of their new house starts making sinister nighttime visits, the family's already turbulent lifestyle descends into horror. The Devil's Candy made the rounds at horror festivals in 2015, but it wasn't until 2017 that the film got a more widespread release via video-on-demand services. Written and directed by Sean Byrne, whose previous film was the equally unique horror flick called The Loved Ones, The Devil's Candy plays with themes from old-school occult films, while confidently slipping into its own modern take on the genre.
Just the gas?
The Evil Within. It's impossible to talk about The Evil Within without mentioning writer-director Andrew Getty, who spent more than a decade meticulously crafting this schizophrenic passion project before passing away in 2015, 2 years before the film was released. But he left us with a very well-made, highly visual horror movie that will surely leave viewers with some very specific nightmares.
Someone like...
The Evil Within tells the story of a mentally handicapped man named Dennis, played by Frederick Kohler, who lives with his brother, played by Sean Patrick Flannery. After Dennis's reflection starts telling him to kill people, things go downhill pretty quickly, to put it mildly.
Yeah, that's a good way of saying it, I guess.
Berlin Syndrome. Stockholm Syndrome is a disturbing condition in which someone who's been kidnapped develops a sense of affection for their kidnapper. The film Berlin Syndrome plays with that idea by following an Australian tourist who has a one-night stand with a man in Berlin, only to find herself locked in his apartment. The struggle that follows is pure psychological horror that dives deep into the mindset of survival and the subtleties of psychosis, all anchored by a phenomenal performance by Australian actress Teresa Palmer and a bone-pounding musical score, sometimes touching, sometimes brutal. Berlin Syndrome is definitely a trip abroad that you won't forget anytime soon. The Blackcoat's Daughter. Writer-director Ox Perkins' slow-burn possession film The Blackcoat's Daughter was made in 2015, but didn't secure a release until 2017. Starring American Horror Stories' Emma Roberts and Dexter's James Remar, the film centers on two girls who are left at their prep school after the rest of the kids go home for vacation. It turns out that both girls are hiding a secret, and events start to spiral out of their control in the worst possible way. If you're looking for a gore fest filled with jump scares, you're better off looking elsewhere. But if you want to spend your night with an atmospheric horror film that bleeds tension, cue this one up.
It's fun to be scared sometimes.
A Dark Song. You couldn't ask for a more powerful directorial debut than A Dark Song. And Liam Gavin, who pulled double duty as both writer and director on this smart, engaging portrayal of ritual black magic, is definitely a director to look for in the future. Gavin crafted a surreal, minimalist film that may be one of the most technically detailed occult movies of the last decade, if not ever. There aren't any jump scares and very little blood, but the build-up over A Dark Song's 100-minute timeline is just as satisfying as the ultimate climax. Dig Two Graves. Not your typical horror movie, Dig Two Graves is more of a hard-boiled revenge tale. The story centers on a young girl who makes a pact with a group of gypsy mountain men to bring her brother back from the dead, if she's willing to pay the price. This indie thriller premiered at the New Orleans Film Festival in October 2014, then quietly sat in the shadows until it was released online in 2017. But it was certainly worth the wait. Dig Two Graves blends revenge, thriller, fantasy, and horror themes into one twisted tale of a girl who may have to make the ultimate sacrifice for her family.
There are no cowards, there are no heroes. There's only the living and the dead.
Lake Bodom. While it may look like a run-of-the-mill scream fest, Lake Bodom's twist is selling itself as a teen slasher flick when it manages to be so much more. If you've never heard of it, don't beat yourself up. After a short festival run, this Finnish horror release slipped quietly onto Shudder, a video-on-demand service specializing in horror movies, virtually ensuring that only a handful of people outside of Finland would ever lay eyes on it. But for horror purists, Lake Bodom is definitely worth tracking down. The Void. Jeremy Gillespie and Steven Kostanski first teamed up to write and direct the 2011 horror comedy Father's Day, a neo-grindhouse tribute to the ultra-violent exploitation film genre that hit its peak in the 70s. Their 2017 follow-up, The Void, uses the same genre-specific cues as that film. only this time to pay tribute to cult 80s body horror. The Void is messy, weird, and a ton of fun. It focuses on a police officer, played by Aaron Poole, who finds himself trapped in a hospital when mysterious hooded figures surround the building. But while staying inside seems safe, he soon finds that the greatest terror is living in the bowels of the hospital itself.
It's disgusting, like Carrie levels of blood, like very gross.
House on Willow Street. Admittedly one of the weaker entries on this list, House on Willow Street may fall a bit short of the mark in pacing, but the premise and visual design more than make up for its flaws. The film is about two crooks who kidnap a young woman in the hopes of getting a ransom from her rich father. Little do they know, their victim is possessed, and soon she begins to turn the tables on her kidnappers. House on Willow Street doesn't do much to defy genre conventions, but it serves very well as a bloody fun horror romp for a lazy evening. The Dark Tapes. At this point, we've had our fill of anthology films. That fad arguably kicked off with 2012's VHS.
It's not haunted. I'm sure there's a reasonable explanation.
Since then, we've had the ABCs of Death, A Christmas Horror Story, Holidays, and Tales of Halloween, to name a few. So when an anthology film comes along that not only exceeds expectations, but shatters them completely, it's worth a mention. The Dark Tapes successfully ratchets up the horror while avoiding all the pitfalls that have doomed so many other entries in this genre. If you want to be grossed out by alien monsters and scared senseless by paranormal visitors, The Dark Tapes is the perfect choice. And while we're on the subject of anthologies, 2017's XX is another quality entry in this genre. And unlike The Dark Tapes, that one's available on Netflix.
Wow. That was intense.
Thanks for watching. Click the looper icon to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Plus check out all this cool stuff we know you'll love too.